Drop your pants and grab your ankles. It's time for Grillo's AftershockXL with your host, Steve Grillo. How the hell did you get a TV show?
TV show, podcast, whatever you want to call it. It's Steve Grillo, and you're listening to Grillo's AftershockXL on the AftershockXL network. Very special day today. I also, we had a really good show last night with Vinny Pastore. I'm not sure what show is going up first, but if you didn't listen to Vinny Pastore, you should listen to Vinny Pastore at some point. We have some big news here on the AftershockXL network. We got some rankings here on the podcast, Apple Podcast rankings for the last 30 days. We are 114 in the category of entertainment news in the United Kingdom. We are 114th place or position. We're in position 145 in the category of entertainment news, United States, and the position 219 in the category of entertainment news in Australia. Now, I know that doesn't seem like it's like in the top 10, but if you go with the percentages of how many podcasts there are out there, that's pretty good. And I'm very happy with that because I have to look at this, we're on so many different, we're on Spotify, iHeart Radio, Google Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Audible, YouTube. Everything is going to my plan. I'm very happy. And the bigger we get, the bigger guests we get. And I met this person on the street with Roy McDonald. We were going there. People were elated to see him. They were taking pictures with him. And we had to stop, and Roy had to take a picture. And then this person does some really good work in the world. I've watched this show from the beginning. I know it's kind of weird to kind of like think about stuff like this, but he does stuff that it protects children. And he does really good things in the world. I have a lot of children that I don't have any children, but I have a lot of people that have children in my life, and they're very special, close, and dear to me. And I would always hate to see if anybody took advantage or did anything bad to them, especially when it comes to sexual predators. And this person that's waiting in the wings right now, I'm very excited to have him because I'm a huge fan of his show. I'm a huge fan of what he does and how he does it. And he is the host of NBC's To Catch a Predator. Mr. Chris Hansen is here, and I'm very excited to have him.
Steve, thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm much better now that you're here. So how you doing today, pal?
I'm good. You know, some people don't really like running into me, believe it or not, especially in dark kitchens.
Yeah, no kidding. When you come out with cookies and lemonade.
Yeah, exactly. Some brownies.
We bumped into you on the street, and you were nice. We're live from Hell's Kitchen. I know you're a Hell's Kitchen guy, and I know you. I heard nothing but good things about you around the neighborhood. Everybody says that you're a gentleman and you're a really fun and nice person to be around and hang out with. And when we bumped into each other, it was true. You were very nice.
Well, you know, it's my neighborhood. We have a home right here, an apartment right here, and then we have also a home in suburban Detroit. Both Gabrielle and I are from Michigan originally, so we're back and forth a lot. But I like this neighborhood, you know, and I like the accessibility. And yeah, I mean, you walk up and down the streets in this area and you run into people. And look, if you're a public figure, if you're somebody who does what I do and has done it for 40 years, you know, you need to work when people don't want to talk to you or take a picture, I suppose. So, you know, part of it. That's part of your job, I think.
Hell's Kitchen is still a neighborhood. That's the fun part about living
there.
Yeah,
it's cool. It's very cool. I enjoy it.
I was down in Gramercy Park for 20 years, and it used to be a neighborhood. Now it's just a gentrified sort of corporate conglomerate. Like there used to be the corner deli, and everybody knew each other's name, and now it's like a Verizon store, a Taco Bell, a bank. You know, when it used to be like a neighborhood kind of thing, and you still get that vibe. You still get the old school Hell's Kitchen people living here, the first generation of the Irish and the Puerto Rican that is still there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you walk down 46th Street and, you know, some of these restaurant owners are third generation. You know, they've been doing this for a long time and they care about the product. They care about their shops and their restaurants and stores. And it's cool. I like it. And it's central, too. So if you want to go to a different neighborhood, if you need to get to your office, if you need to get to a studio, it's all right here. It's very cool.
Yeah. So let's start from your beginning. Where did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Chicago, and in 1968, my dad got transferred. He was in the auto industry to Detroit, so we grew up in the northern suburbs there. Went to high school there, college at Michigan State, and got into the radio part of the business very early. And I'd grown up like a mile and a half from where Jimmy Hoffa was kidnapped. And I became fascinated with that story. I used to ride my bike up to that restaurant and the crime scene and the cops and the FBI agents and the local reporters and network correspondents. And I kind of got bit by the bug back then, Steve. So when I went to school, I just signed up for the radio station, and one thing led to another, and was lucky enough by the end of my 4 years in college to actually be working for the NBC television station, as a part-time reporter, and started there.
I found out that you went to Michigan State yesterday from, I don't know if you know, there's another alumni from Michigan State that is famous from the Howard Stern show, and that's Jackie the Joke Man Martling.
Did Jackie go to Michigan State?
Yes, he did.
How did I not know that?
I don't know, but I was chatting with him yesterday, and I told him that I was excited that I was having you on the show today. And he goes, he went to Michigan State. I was like, well, I'm going to have to bring that up.
Oh, yeah. Well, now, geez, that is shocking because there's a pretty big network of Michigan State people in New York City, and I get the email chain and all that. Oh, God, I'll have to look him up. That's funny.
It's funny. This is an Aftershock first. We're taping early in the morning, and this is actually filled with tea and not booze.
I got some coffee here.
I got a good friend of mine over in Ireland. She came over and brought a bag of Irish tea. And
cool.
I'm obsessed with it. And me not being a caffeine person, when you have a little caffeine, you kind of get jacked. So I'm a little. I'm a little hyped.
I'm ready for you.
Okay. So now you have possibly one of the most important shows on television. Okay, you single out predators, and I really, again, I'm a very protective of children, and luckily for me, I was never. Well, I kind of was. I don't know if I was underage, and something happened with me with a girl that was 19. And I can't say it was rape because I really enjoyed it, but if you can kind of get the picture,
sure.
It was sort of like I thought I was a cocky little bastard, and she took me up on it, and something happened, and it was pretty amazing. But I was 12 and she was 19, and I know that's not right, but it felt right.
Well, we're talking about a whole different sort of thing where somebody is approached by predator online.
Yeah.
And groomed and convinced to do something they shouldn't do that is in fact illegal and quite possibly damaging for a child's lifetime. And so, it's hard to believe, but we, did the very first predator investigation 17 years ago.
Wow.
And we were out doing another one just in the past few months in Michigan. And once again, guys showed up to meet, 12, 13, 14-year-old boys and girls. And we're getting ready to launch a whole new series of Predator episodes. And we have some of them on my YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. It's stunning to me. And one of the reasons why we launched our podcast, Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen, is because, during this pandemic, so many kids are online more often and for longer periods of time, and they can be more easily targeted by predators. And also, Steve, think about this. I mean, when we first did the investigations, we merely had decoys in chat rooms on AOL and Yahoo. Okay. Well, today, I mean, I can't even keep track of the number of social media platforms where kids can be approached by adults with ill intent.
It's scary because they have access. It's such easy access to all stuff like this. Like, it was kind of disturbing because my friends' kids, they're in YouTube and they discovered that I'm on YouTube, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
Because they're looking up my shows and stuff like that, and there's stuff that they don't need to know about me. And there's no regulation for stopping them to go on.
Well, there isn't. I mean, there's supposed to be age limitations, but I mean, we found over and over again. I mean, we've done investigations both on my YouTube channel and for television series that are out now on Discovery Plus, Onision in Real Life. It explores and exposes what some of these content creators were getting away with and making tons of money on. And in some cases had a whole litany of allegations of abuse, sexual impropriety, and predatory behavior, and really did some damage. And it's quite shocking. And it's the wild, wild west out there. And many parents don't understand what their kids can be exposed to and who their kids can be exposed to.
That I think is the main problem, is the parents are just really not paying attention to what's going on. And it's letting people like these predators get away with it. Now, did your inspiration for all this, obviously, I think it's obvious that anybody should be inspired to do what you do because it's just logic. But did you have any instance in your life that made you go, I will never let this happen again? Or did you
No,
know
nothing
something?
like that. I mean, basically, I became aware of the online watchdog group Perverted Justice and thought, well, if we could use their decoys online and combine it with our ability at NBC at the time to wire a house with hidden cameras and microphones, it could be pretty compelling. And so I pitched the story, and it wasn't ever meant in the beginning to be a separate series or franchise. It was meant to be, a story for Dateline, and they bought the pitch, and we did it, and a lot of smart people weighed in on it, and we did that very first episode in Bethpage, Long Island. And I can remember distinctly driving out to the Sting house and wondering, what if nobody shows up? What if I just wasted, tens of thousands of dollars of the network's money? And with that, my producer called and said, we got 2 guys scheduled to show up in 45 minutes. Where the hell are you? And, in 2.5 days, 17 guys surfaced in that investigation, including a New York City firefighter.
That is scary because if you didn't do that, that could have been 17 people that were assaulted, hurt, molested.
Well, I always, people always, look at it as, just some sort of a TV sting, or at least in the beginning. And I think even some judges did when these cases were prosecuted, was a stunt. Well, no. What would have happened if we weren't there and a 13 or 14-year-old boy or girl was there? Well, there would have been a sexual assault, unquestionably. I mean, all these excuses about I was just coming here to check on the child or this or that or the other thing. I mean, just, it's all BS. I mean, the reason these guys show up, and by the way, the crime is usually committed online, the solicitation of a minor. That showing up is the icing on the cake.
How do you keep yourself so calm? Because if I were to walk in that room, I might probably have a little bit of a different attitude towards the people. And you show up and you're the calmest, coolest, sit down, have a drink, have some cookies. It's kind of like, it's comical in a way, the way you handle the situation, because the look on the people's faces that you would expect someone like me would come out and start bashing their head in, where you're just more like, no, take it easy, buddy. Sit down. It's not so bad, which it is. And
it's terrible. But, my job, at least what I believe my job is not to, be Judge Dredd and walk out and administer justice. My job is to get inside this guy's mind and understand what it is that brought him to this situation. What could he possibly have been thinking? What was the process? What was the reason he decided to chat with a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid and show up to have sex with them? And if you can better understand that, then I think, along with hearing voices of victims, you can better protect kids, other people, from becoming victims. And that's been my mantra, for 40 years throughout all my reporting. It's understanding that and taking the viewer along on a journey of discovery to see things they wouldn't normally see and hear things they wouldn't normally hear. And you protect people that way. You educate people that way. You create a dialogue and an awareness that didn't exist before.
Now, when you go through this process, in your cases, what was the most disturbing one that you've ever had? Is there one that stands out?
Well, it's about 100 way. Yeah, it's about 100-way tie for first. I mean, you're talking about 400 plus guys I've confronted over the years, and it's interesting you bring that up though, because I get asked that question all the time. It's a great question, and it forces me to sort of think back on who was the most disturbing, and I can tell you. The one that sticks out, and I almost erased him from my mind, I guess because it was so disturbing, was the one we did. That's the episode that was released just yesterday on the podcast, Predators I've Caught, with Chris Hansen. It's a guy named Chuck Harding. This guy walked into our sting in Riverside, California, 65 years old, and this chat was absolutely just horrifying. He had been a brother in the religious life, the Catholic Church. He had taught in his role there. He had driven a bus for disabled people, and he was a true believer in pedophilia, and had a manual to conduct it, and child porn in his possession, and really, presented a danger to any child who got in his way. And he was a hardcore heavy hitter. He was one of the guys who could never be fixed, I believe. And so we confronted him, and we tell the story in the podcast. It's out now. And actually, he was under investigation after his arrest in our sting by the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for being tied into a whole pedophile and child porn ring. Knowing that he was facing that, he actually stopped taking his medication in jail and essentially, killed himself. But he was going to go away. I mean, at 65, the rest of his life for sure.
There's so many questions, and I'm trying to organize them in my head. So these people say they don't want to sign a release. Say they
It doesn't matter. We don't need a release because. Okay. And I know what you're getting at, because in some shows I've done, we need to get releases. In the some of the series we do today for Discovery Plus, you got to get releases from the people you interview. But in this particular case, Steve, because we are a news organization, a journalistic endeavor, and we are covering what is essentially the commission of a felony as it happens, we don't need to get a release.
I just love that they're exposed. I can't imagine the shame that their family and friends and their coworkers must have when they see people. Well, I was just watching 30 Rock. I never watched 30 Rock before, so I started watching 30 Rock. And last night I was watching the episode where you caught Tina Fey's boyfriend on like a predator. He comes in with balloons.
It was great.
What's that kid's name? I used to hang out with him all the time. I can't think of his name.
He was great fun to work with, and I'll think of his name the minute I get off your show, I'm sure. But a great young actor, and
he's Mr. Mayhem on the commercials.
Yeah. He could not have been more pleasant to work with.
Oh, he's a good dude.
We shot it at a house in Queens, I think, and it was so much fun to do. And people always ask, what is it like to have this show and your image be a part of pop culture? And I said, well, I always tell the story when my two oldest kids, who are now in the business, were in high school. They went to a high school with kids whose dads did a lot of important stuff. So, having a dad on TV wasn't that big of a deal. But when South Park did a Chris Hansen Predator episode, suddenly I was the coolest dad, and the way, it's clever, that show, and obviously a lot of pop culture stuff still revolves around the Predator series and franchise. But if somebody wants to make fun of me, I don't mind, because it still creates awareness and a dialogue about a very important topic. And so I think all of that plays back into what we try to do here, which is create awareness and a dialogue. And
there you go.
Yeah. Chris Hansen.
Noah's on point. That's my producer. Thank you, Noah. You're great. So here's another situation. So now, I of course, this is all alleged stuff that we're about to talk about. But, there's always been this talk about this bizarre sex ring, Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton, all these things that are pretty much out there. They're all speculation, hearsay, conjecture. But there always seems to be a ring of truth to something like this sex ring that's going on. Jeffrey Epstein, did he kill himself? His island, the underage girls, Bill Clinton. How come there's no further investigation into this? Why is it not being exposed more?
Well, I think there are investigations continuing, and I think there's an active investigation, and clearly Epstein was, a class 1 predator. He's like Peter Nygaard, who we profiled in the Unseemly investigation, also on Discovery Plus. These guys with, millions and millions of dollars, who, for whatever combination of reasons, prey upon women and children in the most abhorrent ways. And because of their money and their power, they get away with it for a while. And you bring up the Epstein case. I think it's a great example of local reporting. I had been working a little bit on the Epstein case, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and was trying to put together a sting of some sort in New York here, where he has a residence. And we weren't able to do it. And to be honest with you, I got busy with other projects. It was Julie K. Brown at the Miami Herald who kept chipping away and convinced these very brave survivors to speak out. And it was her reporting in Miami that ultimately led to the U.S. Attorney's Office here in New York City filing charges against Epstein. I mean, that's the truth of it. I mean, she and her team kept digging away. And finally, these traumatized but very brave survivors came forward, and that's what made this case. I mean, and I think, we did that with the Nygaard case, which is, you look at that. I mean, this is as big, if not more offensive than Epstein, if you can believe that. And, we were on it. The CBC was on it. The New York Times was on it. But this is when reporting is at its best, when you expose these things and you put the pressure on people to do something about it. And we've exposed other predators. And during this time of pandemic and civil strife, many prosecutors' offices across the country aren't picking up cases unless they're, murders. And so these guys who are doing this stuff online are getting away with it because, honestly, in some areas of the country, they don't have time to bring these cases to the DA's office to prosecute them.
When you were first investigating, you brought up the whole Epstein thing. Were you ever told by a superior to squash the case?
No, never. It really, I had some meetings with some investigators. I had some documents and some files from his plea deal. I knew where he lived in New York City on the Upper East Side, and I had heard the allegations that he was still, operating with high-profile people and underage girls. And that's really, I had more than that, but that's really what I had. And that case was difficult because he had so much security around him, and that's my point. I was trying to do something that was high-end and high production television in a sting, and it was local reporters who kept chipping away, especially Julie K. Brown, who just wrote a book on the whole thing, and really made this case. And that's why, some of these platforms like YouTube and Patreon and that, you can have the ability to start a story, to expose somebody who's, committing these crimes, and build it into something bigger on a larger platform where you can get some sort of justice.
So a good friend of the show, Ian Halpern, is a best-selling author and offered Prince Albert. Is that the one that's under investigation? Is it Prince Albert?
Andrew.
Prince Andrew, $100 million to take a lie detector test. And of course he's not going to respond, but it seems like he's more guilty than anybody out of this whole thing, and he's being protected by the royal family. What's your take on someone that's pretty much caught on camera, have people straight up saying this is what he did, and now this is what's going on?
Well, I think he was definitely in the mix here. I don't have any evidence above and beyond what has been out there. I'm working on something. I'm working on someone who has information, who can tell a very interesting story about Andrew. Someone who's extremely worried about their safety if they come forward. And so it's one of these, nip and tuck efforts to get somebody to speak, but to preserve their personal safety. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to make it happen, but I'm sure going to try. But the allegations directly relate to Prince Andrew and his activity with Epstein.
Yeah, but someone like him is just protected. He's not going to.
Well, he's in the royal family, so he's he's going to look at it as cheeky behavior, and we look at it as being a full on predator. It's bad and illegal and worth investigating.
So what happens? The guys come in, they leave. My favorite part of the show is when the police come and tackle them, and they're just sitting there, their mouths open, not realizing how much trouble they're in. What's the process after? What happens that once they leave the house and they're in police custody?
Well, they're interrogated by police. The district attorney's office, the prosecutor's office, prosecutes the case, and we've seen people get sentences ranging from probation to 50 years in prison. Depending on their backgrounds and depending on whether or not they possess child pornography, depending on, how the whole case went down. And the vast majority of the guys who've surfaced in these investigations have been successfully prosecuted. A handful have gotten away, but a tiny percentage.
Have you heard any stories of after they've been on the show, what they've had to go through at home.
Oh, that's we get into that. Yeah, we get into that in the podcast. I mean, if you remember the rabbi who surfaced in our investigation in Herndon, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. I mean, this guy got a 6.5-year sentence in a federal court after being prosecuted by the FBI, and he hasn't been able to stay out of trouble. I mean, you'd think that this is a guy who would at some point go straight, but yet he has been in and out of prison, numerous occasions for violating his parole. He's in with his therapist, and he's not supposed to have a device that his parole officer is not aware of to connect to the internet. And the parole officer comes to visit him at the therapy session, and his illegal phone rings. Well, back he goes. He violated again. I mean, it's amazing. There are some cases, and I'm trying to get these guys to talk to me, where some of the younger guys who are first-time offenders have gone straight, have made something of their lives. And as you can imagine, it's a difficult decision for these guys to say, okay, I want to revisit all this, and go on Chris Hansen's podcast or show. I'd like to, because I'd like to give these guys a fair shot at redemption.
Everybody makes mistakes, but that's just a really dangerous mistake. You always wonder how many times they've done it before.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, so if you look at Chuck Harding, who's the topic of the podcast out right now, I'm gonna bet money, that this was not his first rodeo, based upon the material that he had in his possession, the child porn, his belief that it was okay for a grandfather to be with his, somebody who looked like his grandson. I mean, he had this down, and he was part of a larger group of pedophiles. And if you talk to psychiatrists and therapists who really study this and talk to inmates in prisons, the inmates, and they have nothing to gain from this, right? They're in for forever or for a long time. They'll tell the therapist two things. One, if they got caught once, they had offended 2 or 3 times at least before. 2, there is very definitely a link between the viewing of child pornography and predatory behavior. Unquestionably, those two things are true.
Have you ever been in a situation where you did catch somebody and somebody from higher up came down and said, no, you can't air that?
Never. No, I've never. This whole notion of media being censored, I've never experienced it in 40 years. Nobody has ever said to me, we're not doing that story because it reaches into somebody who's, part of our network or somebody in the business. And look, we did an investigation 5-6 years ago in Fairfield, Connecticut. And a guy walked in, and he looked familiar to me, and he first thing he says is, Chris, no, it's not what it seems. It's a guy I had met on the train commuting from New York City to Connecticut. I mean, this was a guy who I had talked to before. It wasn't a buddy or anything, but it was somebody I knew. And there he is in my sting operation, there to meet a 13-year-old boy. Can you imagine?
No.
I mean, it took me like a whole day, Steve, to process that. And I couldn't remember the guy's name because he wasn't a close friend. And I texted another fellow who I was friendly with from the commuter train from Metro North. I said, who's the guy? And I described him. And he said, oh, that's, so-and-so. And I said, oh, my God. Because the crew all thought that the guy just knew me from television. Yeah. I had no idea that, he was a guy who I had known from the commuter train.
I bartended in nightclubs for at least 20 years. And sometimes, not that this is on the same page, but I kind of understand, like there was one situation where, I was bartending and it was a gay night and I bumped into someone's parent that wasn't supposed to be there, kind of situation. And you were like, uh-oh. And I never really revealed anything, because it was just too awkward. But,
right.
You're like, that's blah, blah, blah's dad. And he's out there with no shirt on dancing at a gay nightclub. And it's like, okay. It's an awkward situation,
The wooden Indian rule. The wooden Indian doesn't speak.
Yeah, exactly. I just left that one alone. But so you got let me ask you a question. I know there's something recently just happened with you in the news. Is that something you can elaborate on, or you don't want to get into?
No, it's fine. It was a very simple issue that some in the digital media used as clickbait. But in the most recent predator investigation in Michigan, we had done 2 in Michigan, and one of them was in a small county. We were actually with the Genesee County Sheriff, but we did this thing in Shiawassee County, a small town. And we had caught, one of the guys was a prison guard, a Michigan corrections officer, who told his wife and children that he was going to Home Depot to get paint, but instead was going out to have sex with a 14-year-old girl. And we caught him in the sting. And he admitted everything to me on camera. And we did a story for the YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, and we're going to include him as part of the new television series as well. So his defense lawyer requests the raw video from the sting. Now, normally what happens is that would go through the prosecutor's office, and then the defense lawyer would get that through discovery. In this case, for whatever reason, the prosecutor didn't do it first. The defense lawyer did, and they kept trying to serve me at the house in Michigan. And I called the lawyer and I said, look, here's the name of my lawyer in New York. We're going to facilitate everything you need, as long as it's a lawful subpoena, and we will comply, but reach out to the lawyer in New York. Well, they never did that. And so a show cause hearing was set to explain why we had not turned over all the video that they wanted. And nobody told us about the hearing. So I'm sitting in the apartment here, and the lawyer calls and said, hey, I just found out there's a hearing in Michigan tomorrow. Did you know anything about this? I said, no. He said, so he tries to call the lawyer, and then the next morning tries to call the court. Well, the lawyer sneaks in at exactly 8:05 to the courthouse, a small courthouse in Corunna, Michigan, and represents to the judge that I was uncooperative and had been properly served. But we didn't know there was a hearing. It was obscene. And so he's trying to call the lawyer before the hearing. The lawyer says, I can't talk now. I've got him going into the hearing. Totally misrepresents it to the judge. The judge, not having the benefit of of knowing everything, issues a bench warrant for non-compliant, for not showing up at the hearing. Well, had we known, we could have, done a Zoom appearance. I mean, all these court cases are done by Zoom anyway. It's a civil matter. So for a very short period of time, there was a bench warrant. The lawyers tried to call the courtroom. The clerk wouldn't put them through to the judge, whatever. So the next morning, we went in and explained to the judge. The judge was cleared up in 43 minutes. It was done. It was an absolute non-issue related to a civil matter on videotapes. And the tapes are turned over. There was absolutely no issue there. Yet, on a slow news cycle, some in the digital media decided to use my name as clickbait. But that's the story.
It's unfortunate because, again, I've heard nothing but nice things about you in the neighborhood, that you were a really good guy. But there are certain people out there, because of what you do, regardless of what their intention might be, are looking for you to fail. Like they almost want you to get caught like with a little kid. You know what I'm saying? Like they're waiting for the hammer to drop with you, and it's real easy for that because you're doing good, and everybody thinks that why is he doing this? Maybe there's some like premeditated like thing that you got going on. Why you're obsessed with this? Because maybe you do it yourself. And that's. I mean, I don't know that anybody's out to get me. Certainly, I think there are people who I've pursued journalistically who anybody can in the online world today gin up a misinformation campaign, and certainly that's happened. But people know better at the end of the day. I mean, look, it's not like the Predator stories are the only journalism I've ever done. I mean, I've got 10 Emmys and none of them are for the Predator series. I mean, the Predator series is, 5-10% of my portfolio. So I think people understand that. I think, if you catch something that's misunderstood and, suddenly people are getting a lot of clicks, they're going to exploit it. And it's the dark side of this business is that people don't read sometimes or put the effort into the second paragraph. But that's all that was. It seems like the lawyer just wanted to get his name in the paper.
Well, I think the lawyer is trying to jam us up. I mean, people forgot that the story here is that a Michigan prison guard, a corrections officer, was trying to have sex. And if you look at the transcripts, they're very explicit, very disturbing. I mean, he's trying to create doubt to defend his client. And this wouldn't have happened, Steve, in any other courthouse in America.
No.
If it was one county over in Genesee County, it's big enough where they would understand. The only reason this happened was it was in a small town courthouse where people misrepresented the facts of the case to the judge. The judge, wasn't trying to cause me any pain or harm. And in fact, it was, once it was resolved, we were over in the little breakfast joint across the street with all the lawyers and people from the courthouse. And, it was a non-event, but yet there were no local reporters there.
Yeah.
That nobody was, I would have bought a breakfast, coffee at least.
A couple of cookies, some lemonade.
Yeah, whatever.
So we're going to try to wrap it up because I know you got a busy day today. So, but like one of the most comical moments I remember, and it's like, because on Facebook, there's a lot of, they just set up clips, which is just like, the juicy meat of the whole thing. And there was one guy where you're reading the transcript back to him, and he's trying to say, no, I'm not gay. It was supposed to be a 14-year-old boy. And he's trying to say he's not gay, but you're like, right here on the transcript, you said you wanted to raw dog him. What is a raw dog mean? And we all kind of know what that means, but I love that you pretended like you didn't know what it was, and you're asking him to explain raw dog.
I wanted him to explain it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was just like, I almost spit my coffee out. I was like, but I'm not gay. But you just said you wanted to raw dog a 14-year-old. What does that mean? Do you have a special funny moment where you would just almost spit your coffee out?
Well, I think, undeniably, there have been some humorous moments in the very serious series of investigations. But I think one that sticks out is there was a fellow who walked into our sting house on the Jersey Shore, and before I could say anything, he literally looks at me and goes, "Oh man, you're Chris Hansen." And I said, "Well, how did you know that?" He said, "Well, I watch your show all the time. When I miss him, I pick him up on the internet." I said, "Do you even get?" I mean, he was excited to be on the show. I mean, he truly was. And it happened, in one other instance in Petaluma, where a guy walked in and said, I was just kidding. I just wanted to make sure that this was you. And can you turn the cameras off? No, I'm not going to turn the cameras off. I mean, these guys forget that I have all the transcripts.
Yeah.
And that's the spine of the case. That's, in most states, all prosecutors need for a successful case are the transcripts. The solicitation of a minor takes place online. The fact that they show up, is important. It's the television part of it. It's sometimes evidentiary. Sometimes they bring things that show intent, but it's the transcript. It's the chat online that basically makes the case.
No, there was, when I worked on the Howard Stern show, Howard did his little part in trying to exposing this whole underworld. And it was, he used to play, it was a tape recording of an answering machine, and it went something like this. I'm going to try to pull it off, and it was a really weird, creepy voice. And it goes, "This is NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. Don't worry, our oppression will soon end. If you're a man and love a boy, don't be afraid. It's okay to be a boy lover." And that was like the answering machine to NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, where there was this whole thing where these people thought they were wrong to be persecuted for liking little boys.
Oh, yeah. Well, that the FBI had basically put them out of business until the internet. And then, obviously they were back up and running because it was so difficult to track these people. But yeah, it's outrageous.
So what do you got coming up? Tell everybody what's going on. What do we
expect?
I hope
we've got we should know in the next couple of weeks where the new Predator investigations are going to air on television. We have 2 series up on Discovery Plus right now. Unseemly, the Peter Nygaard investigation, as well as Onision in real life, about a YouTube content creator who engaged in just some very disturbing predatory behavior targeting young women. And we're working on a couple other television series as we speak that I'll be able to talk about very soon. We've got the podcast, Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen, YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. And I'm out there on social media and working hard.
Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. Real quick, we'll end it on this, and it just came to my mind. Have you ever caught a woman?
Never. And the therapists and people in this world with whom we speak say it's because typically when you talk about a female predator, you're more likely to see the teacher-student scenario as opposed to the anonymity of somebody who meets online. It happens. It's never happened in one of our investigations, but it does happen. And but the male predator seems to enjoy the anonymity where the female predator does not. So we've never seen it.
So basically, men are just filthy pigs, and that's the bottom line.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. We'll end it on that. Chris Hansen, thank you so much.
Steve, thank you. A pleasure.
Yeah, have a seat with Chris Hansen. That's a great line. I thank you so much for coming in. I'll see you a little later. Everybody, I appreciate you tuning in. Grillos AftershockXL. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Audible, and iHeart Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Peace out. Grillos AftershockXL. Well, this will be up soon, I hope. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Steve.